That is interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, Joe, you're good.
Okay, we're good. Thank you. It's the meeting of the Town of West Warwick Planning Board, Monday, December 7th, 2020, 6 p.m. Mr. DeFiore, could you take the roll call of the board, please?
Joseph DiMartino,
Here.
Felix Apollonia, Joe Gardosic,
Here.
Anthony Petracca,
Anthony's muted.
He's muted. He's muted. But he's here.
Anthony, he's here.
Okay,
There
there
he
you go. You're all set now.
Joshua Barrett,
Here.
Joseph Garcia,
Here.
Jessica Robry.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Okay, thank you. Item 1 is approval of the minutes from the last meeting, from the meeting from November 8th, 2020. Do I have a motion that we accept the minutes as submitted?
I'll move that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and is there a second?
Josh. Second.
Any further discussion? No. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, item 2, a public hearing, major land development project. The applicant is Justin Wilbur. It's 43 Green Street. Assessors plat 4, lots 215 and 7, residential R10, 8.95 acre parcel. Number 3 lots, SPM Engineering and Situate Surveys Inc. are the engineers. It's requesting a preliminary approval of a vested 16-unit condominium project on 3.88 acres in residential R8 zone. The original project received master plan approval in 2007 and was extension granted in 2009, and it's now no, they call it vested. What do they call it? I don't know. It's been approved. The approval was extended forever. and by the legislature after the 2009 or during the 2009 recession. And I assume there is someone here to speak for the applicant. So why don't we start with that public hearing? So someone to speak for the applicant, I assume.
Good evening.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, members, thank you very much for having this meeting. I know how difficult these all are. And we've had this hanging around a long time. We're kind of anxious to move along, so I really appreciate it. I'd like to, if I could start in maybe a little more detail than normal, because this project's been around a while, and I don't know if anybody was on the board at that time. So we received, prior to the master plan review, we actually had a special use permit granted by the zoning board, which enabled us to go to the planning board. And at the planning board, actually in both meetings, we had unanimous vote from both the zoning board and the planning board for approval. The planning board was a master plan which vested us in this additional 16 units on this property. And at that time, consistent with the law, there were findings, and I look at Mark's notes that he filed in the Secretary of State. In the findings, he listed the findings, actually, most of which were findings that were included in the master plan approval, and that this plan is generally consistent with the comprehensive plan, generally consistent with the zoning ordinance, no environmental impacts, talked about safe circulation, pedestrian vehicle traffic, all those things that we normally would hope to find as findings for the master plan. So this has been a long time. We've worked on this quite a long time. As you know, that when we come to you with a master plan, that's basically an unengineered representation of what the applicant wants to do. And this has been developed over a number of years. And actually, it's a nice development in my opinion, and I think others, the end result of this. My client has had meetings with many of the neighbors. In fact, today he said he actually met with about 15 of them personally, has had meetings with the people to the east, the boundary line, and I'm going to get to that in a little more detail. And there was a meeting in July, I believe it was July 29th, he actually held a community meeting to discuss this with the neighbors, to give them an idea of what was going on. So we've done the best we can to meet with everybody, trying to be good neighbors on this. There's a list of recommendations that Mark has in there. And the first one is in regards to the language that's in the master plan review, which says the land along the easterly boundary of the property shall remain in its natural condition. So let me give you a little background on this, to the best of my recollection. There was a neighbor who lived to the east who was a major objected to that. And his issue was the issue of the water, natural water runoff. Well, since that time, a lot has changed. The neighbor's not there anymore. My client has met with the neighbors there, one of whom granted him an easement over that property, over his property, onto our property for sewers. So sewers are now available. They've had many discussions about what they were going to do with the water runoff, and we'll get into that. And my client agreed and did put a fence up, screening along his property, and has agreed with his neighbor, who's the other butter to the east, that there will also be a fence put up on that. And developing it to the best of our ability to put as much screening as we could. And the water runoff, I'm gonna comment on the water runoff, and our engineer, hopefully Mike Zavalia from Commonwealth is here. I see his name appearing on there, so he's joined us. In any questions you have in regards to the detail, but we've reduced the water runoff off of the property dramatically, which was the issue that was raised then by a system that actually took a long time to get designed. And one of the major things that were done was that there was asphalt actually to the east of the units that were placed over there, and that is no longer asphalt. The asphalt is on the westerly side of those properties, which reduced the amount of water runoff. And he'll go through this whole plan, but to tell you that we work with these people, they're satisfied. Hopefully they may even show up tonight, but they're satisfied that we've done the best that we can. And when you talk about disturbance, the only area that's really disturbed, and we can't help it, because the area where the easement comes in. So that's by its very nature going to be disturbed land. But I think the intent was to satisfy these people to the right. I don't know what the word, how wide boundary line is. I know at that point in time, the discussions were that there was a 25-foot setback there anyway. So that's kind of the best I can do without having the engineer jump in here and explain exactly what the effect on that natural water runoff is.
Sandy, I think I'd like to hear from the engineer. Is this the
And on
right?
that particular matter, sure, he can jump right in.
Okay, because he's here, right?
Yeah, Mike?
Joe, I want to swear him in.
Yeah. Mr. Zavalia, you are muted. Please unmute yourself, and Al DeFiore will swear you in before you testify.
Zavalia, could you state your name and address?
Couldn't hear you, Mr. Zavalia. Can you somehow speak up louder, perhaps?
Mike?
Jason?
No.
I'm on the planning board meeting. Can I call you back?
Yeah.
Mr. Zavalia?
He's trying to unmute his phone.
He just put a message on there.
Yeah.
Hello?
Hello, Mr. Zavalia? He's
Says connecting to audio.
Yeah, it says he's connecting, so. Well, this doesn't seem to be working. So Sandy, why don't you continue
Well,
on?
let me go on and we'll
then
see
we
him jump on. Yeah, we've got a lot of different things that I'm kind of
Yeah,
going to roll
okay.
through. Hopefully it won't take too long to roll through them, but I thought it'd be the best way to do this. And obviously you can interrupt me at any time. And,
Okay.
The next thing, again, I'm going along Mark's list because it's helpful to
Yep.
me.
Yep,
Mr. Zavalia, are you
Hello
on?
there. I am. Apologies for the delay.
no,
I've done a number of these Zoom meetings, but it seems like there's a little wrinkle every different town that I do.
okay.
Could you state your name and address, please?
Yes, my name is Michael Zavalia. I'm a registered professional engineer working for Commonwealth Engineers and Consultants, 400 Smith Street, Providence, Rhode Island.
Would you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Sandy, do you want to give some background to
Yeah,
qualify him as an expert?
Mike, I don't know if you were on when I was on. I was explaining to,
Sandy, you want to qualify him as an expert?
yes, I do.
Okay. So, somebody give us some background on Mr. Zavalia so we can accept him as an expert. Sandy, you want to do that?
I'm going to ask, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask Mike to
Mike can
give
do
us
it
a little
himself.
bit of his own
That's fine.
background.
Yep. Mike, can you give us a little
Mike,
bit? of
give it some experience in some of the work that you've done, we've done it.
Sure thing. I'm a registered professional civil engineer. I have been practicing civil engineering since 1994. I've been certified with the license since 2003. I've worked for a number of different agencies and entities, including the town of West Warwick as a town engineer, and many moons ago. And I have worked on predominantly land development projects with heavy concentration in stormwater management and environmental permitting.
Motion to accept him as an expert.
Yeah, I'll entertain a motion. Someone going to move the motion to accept?
I'll move the motion.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Mike, Mr. Zavalia, actually, Sandy, why don't you?
Yeah, well, Mike, I don't know what I was talking, the beginning of my talk, I discussed the issue that was raised in the recommendations in regards to the stipulation about the natural, the land along the easterly boundary of the property shall remain in its natural condition. And I discussed the time and the effort that was made in regards to the water retention. If you could get into that, explain how this water retention is, what percentage of the water is being reduced, and how it's affecting those people to the east.
Right.
Sure, happy to. Would it be possible for me to share the screen so that I can be referencing our project plans?
Yes, go ahead, Mike. You should be able to share your screen.
All right, let me get to the right sheet.
There you go.
All right,
Okay.
very good. I'm going to minimize this to give us a little more viewing space. Well, that's a lot of lines and letters and numbers.
Yeah, but it's actually significantly different from the plan that we had been looking at. So you're gonna have to explain this, how it changed. The one we were looking at had two different storm retention areas that looked like they were tiered, and so there was a number of things that were different. So please,
Yep.
If you could explain how this is different and why it's better, okay?
Sure, yep. So the project has gone through a number of iterations, as you can see by the number of revisions. A number of those were revisions made by the client's request to optimize the design. Other revisions were made to respond to comments from various agencies with jurisdiction, including West Warwick Sewer Authority, Kent County Water Authority, RIDEM. So I recall, I'm not sure which revision you're looking at right now, but I recall one iteration where we had stormwater basin and then another stormwater basin, and it is tiered.
Yep.
I'm going to back up just a little bit to give an overview of the site itself
Okay.
to create some context. So the topography of the site is running from generally west to east. It's fairly significant. We're on a hill.
Yep.
And so it actually made it fairly straightforward for us from a stormwater management standpoint for collection and conveyance. Everything is flowing where we want it to. And as Sandy had alluded to, a prior iteration at the master plan had some underground infiltration chambers and some general unengineered proposals for stormwater management. We have come back with a different configuration, different building units. And what that has done has to move everything further to the east in order to fit the various proposed units, the 16 units, and for us to locate, because our goal is to capture and treat and manage the stormwater runoff from the entirety of the site, which means that we need to be close to the bottom of the site with our infrastructure.
Yep.
So previous iterations had multiple basins. These are still, in a sense, tiered, where we have the first step in the treatment is here, and that is an underground sand filter chamber system. And the purpose for that is to provide water quality treatment. One of the standards that we need to meet now for DEM is that a certain portion of the runoff has to be treated, cleaned, basically polished, to remove any pollutants that might be in the stormwater runoff.
Okay.
So we're going to do that on this project with an underground system. It's going to consist of a number of, they're often used as infiltration chambers. In this case, we're using them for storage. And then there will be a sand filter layer beneath that. And it's not going to actually infiltrate, because we do have ledge on the site that is fairly close and underlying the site. So it is going to receive stormwater runoff, and it's going to filter it through the sand filter that's underneath those chambers. And then the outflow from that will run down into the second component of the stormwater management, which is a detention basin.
Okay.
And I want to stress the semantics here are quite important. Sandy had mentioned the word retention. We are not retaining stormwater on site. Retention versus detention, it's kind of like back in high school, if you messed up, they sent you to detention. They didn't keep you there for the rest of your life. They held you there for a period of time, and then you went home.
Yeah.
This is a similar premise. We have a large basin that has available storage volume. And so when storm comes through the area, rain falls, and it will reach our drainage system. It's going to be within the common driveway, enter the catch basins, run down through the pipes and the structures. The first flush, which is the water quality volume, will come through and be filtered through the sand filter. Larger storm volumes will come down and will enter more directly the detention basin. All of the flow will go through the sand filter and the detention basin. The purpose for this is to mitigate, which is to at least balance the peak flow rates that are leaving the site right now. And basically the way that the patterns are going, we have stormwater runoff that, and I'm going to actually go back up a little bit to the existing conditions. All right, so this is the undeveloped site, and in this southeastern corner, we do have an isolated special aquatic site. We're staying away from that. We also have an intermittent stream that has an associated buffer with it. The stormwater patterns are generally running from west to east, following the topography, coming down and eventually gravitating towards this southeast corner, there is a small channel that leaves the site in the southeast corner, and then off of the viewport that I have here, it runs down between the yards for, I think it's 3 or 4 houses before it then makes its way into Flynn Terrace.
Okay.
So what we have done with our stormwater management, our target or our obligation, it's not even a target, it's an obligation, is that when we come in and we do all of this development, and we have impervious area for the roofs, we have impervious area for the common driveway, the individual driveways, all of that is going to generate more runoff than is currently leaving the site right now, more peak flow rate. It's going to increase how quickly that volume of water is leaving the site. Our obligation is to mitigate that, which means we have to at least match the current flow rate leaving the site with our proposed design. So again, we do that by routing it through various structures and holding it up long enough so that while the storm is going on, we're building up storage in these various structures, and the water is being metered out slowly at a rate that is less than or equal to what would currently come off the site. So I'm going to pop over to another, oops. That was the dining room at Christmas time. That's not pertinent to our project.
Okay.
I was looking for another PDF that I had open. I had a summary table that was submitted to DEM that lists the flow rates, but I'll go by memory. Under current conditions for the most highest magnitude storm that we analyzed, which is the 100-year event, the site is currently going to generate roughly 16.5 cubic feet per second of stormwater runoff down in this direction. Under developed conditions, that number would go up to a little more than 29 cubic feet per second. So that's a pretty appreciable increase. It's almost a 100% increase. The combination of these structures during the 100-year event and routing the runoff through it will actually reduce that stormwater runoff to, I think it was a little more than 6 cubic feet per second. So that's a significant decrease relative to the current conditions. So again, our goal here and our obligation, quite frankly, as the engineers, is to ensure that what we do on the site will have no adverse impact on the stormwater patterns leaving the site and on the adjacent properties. We could meet the letter of the regulations by matching the existing flow rates leaving the site at roughly 16 CFS during a 100-year event. We have actually oversized the infrastructure, cognizant of the fact that we do have an adjacent property owner here. We have runoff that is leaving the site down in this corner. We've actually oversized these structures to exceed the mitigation requirement and actually reduce the flow rates to a lower level than we would otherwise have to in order to meet the standards. So, and that's just because, again, we really are aware that these people could be adversely impacted if we don't do a good enough job with our stormwater management. And the last thing that we want to do is cause them any kind of harm or any kind of issues.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mike. The question on the eastern boundary, there was a stipulation on the original master plan approval that it was going to remain in its natural state. To me, it doesn't make sense that it would remain in its natural state, but I'm looking at your stormwater retention area, and it seems as though there's a pretty steep embankment east of the detention area and between the detention area and the property, the boundary. And you have piping going through there. I don't know, it's storm drainage, maybe piping, sewer piping, perhaps. That because it's hard to see at this scale. But so my question really is at that point, right? Okay, all right, good, thank you. That helps. Thanks. So I just want to make sure that we're consistent with what the original master plan decision required, okay? And I'm, it's, so what you have may in fact be better than what they required. I'm not sure, but I'm not sure why this was included. Again, this was done originally in 2007, 13 years ago, long before any of us were on the planning board. And so it's new to us, okay?
Mhm.
And we just need to make sure that what was on the original master plan is faithfully being honored here, okay? And so that's why I'm asking the question, all right?
Joe, if I might interrupt a moment.
Yep.
And subject to Mark's agreement with me, your master plan came in under a conceptual version.
Yep.
I think I heard him state that even the layout of the units is different this time around. So
Yep.
that while you can, and again, I'll refer to Mark on this, while you can accept the guidance of the master plan, as long as you stay with the basic concept,
Yep.
you have the ability to make modification to it.
Yep.
Mark, am I correct in that?
I would think so.
You're correct, Al. With
Yeah,
regard to
and
modifying, the layout is clearly modified. The original master plan of the development was more like a rows of units as opposed to, duplex units as they're presented here. At the end of the day, I think the question that I had, which is in the stipulations, I wasn't involved in the original. I don't think anyone on the board except maybe Felix was involved in the original. Is just the wording of the stipulation and the extent of the stipulation. It was really undefined. And I think that's what the chairman is getting to is the land along the East B boundary shall remain in its natural condition.
right.
To what depth, to what degree?
Yeah.
That without knowing and without it being presented on a plan, because there was certainly nothing presented on the master plan with regard to that.
No.
It was, we're left trying to figure out the intent of a prior board, I think.
Right.
What the chairman is looking for is some information from the applicant as to what their recollection was on the stipulation. I think Sandy touched on that a little bit, talking about the abutting neighbors. I think if Felix is on, or he may be a resource for us to talk to too. But other than that, the board is kind of on its own and making interpretation, or even changing or reinterpreting the stipulation by adding clarity to it. That's a possibility too.
Yeah.
I am also of the opinion, but stand to be corrected, that at this time, we were operating without a town planner.
Yeah, that could be.
Could be, yeah. Right. So
I believe we were in between town planners at this time.
Yeah, so I wasn't involved. I'm just looking at the record, what's on the record. If we're going to deviate from what was on the record and what's approved, we need to be able to have strong justification for that deviation. Okay, this is my approach to this. We want to see the development take place. We're not anti-developing this. We just want to make sure that it's done well, and that it's done consistent with what was originally approved. I do think the stormwater runoff situation that you presented, Mr. Zavia, is an improvement over the plan that I had seen for sure, and I think it'll work very well. So I'm still wondering about. I just wonder about that leaving the eastern property. I don't know why that was thrown in. It was not defined very well, but why it needs to be left, supposedly left in its natural state, I don't get it. But
I may be able to speak a little bit to that. Not that I was involved in 2007, but I have seen the conceptual plan that was developed. The units that were contemplated at that time were significantly different. They were smaller. Their arrangement was very much more row housing-like, with loop driveways around them. And because of that, it was possible to contain a lot of the development further up the hill to the west. It also, at least in my opinion, was a little more out of character with what is going on the abutting properties, which are largely single-family detached dwellings. It would have been a very different feel. That particular iteration would have been a very different feel. It would have felt much more like small apartment complex.
Yeah.
This evolution with the proposed units, and granted they are triplexes and duplexes, they're connected, but they're larger units, and the configuration is much more similar to what's going on in the neighborhood around it. And I think that they fit better. It fits more harmoniously with the surrounding area. However, the trade-off in that is that everything, all of the development for these larger units in this configuration slides down further into the site to the east. And when that happens, as I mentioned, our goal is to certainly capture and manage all of the additional runoff that's generated by these units in the driveway, pushing all of our stormwater management further down. So I think that, and again, I'm doing the same thing right now that you were doing, which is trying to get into the minds of the prior planning board. But I think that the plan presented at that time allowed for more undisturbed area to the east by the nature, just the very nature of the buildings that were proposed in the configuration. At this point, I think that the developer, Justin, has proposed a superior iteration with better buildings, better units, in a configuration that's going to fit better with the rest of the neighborhood. The trade-off to that, again, as I said, is that things do get moved down further to the east. And from a technical standpoint, I've already discussed the stormwater management. I've moved now to this sheet, the utility plan. I'd like to point out something that Sandy had referenced, which is the access to the sanitary sewers for us to connect is on Flint Terrace. There's an existing manhole in the cul-de-sac. And in order to reach it, the developer has secured an easement across this adjacent property to run the sanitary sewer. So this pipe and these structures that you see are sanitary sewer. Okay. And we come in here and we then have to take a route around because we can't go through and under the storm drainage, so we need to go around.
Okay.
And one of the requirements that we have for this infrastructure is the ability to access it for proper inspection and maintenance periodically, and that applies to the sanitary sewer here as well as for the storm drainage. So in order to provide vehicular access, this is all going to be grassed, but it will be an accessible lane 12 feet wide that a vehicle, small equipment, would be able to come in and make the route from the end of the hammerhead down and around if they needed to. So to summarize, the project has evolved from what it originally was, and I think it has improved, but the trade-off is that the infrastructure does push further down, and it by default, based on the locations that it occupies, is going to eliminate the ability to provide the originally contemplated buffer. In talking to the abutting property owner who was at the neighborhood meeting, the developer did commit to installing additional fencing along the property line to screen her property from the site. And it would be possible as well to do some plantings. I know the developer has access to a nursery, so I think if the intent was to provide ample screening and a barrier for this property, that it is certainly possible to do that with this current iteration.
Joe, if I might interrupt for a moment regarding that sewer line, only because of an issue that came up at the last town council meeting about a private sewer line, which this will be. I don't know whether or not the wastewater would want it or not, but would the developer agree at least to discuss, if they have not already done it, some type of an agreement, if the board passes this, that they would, in case of emergency, they would allow wastewater to go onto their property in that event, but it's their responsibility. I mean, something that would have to be worked out. I just think that in view of what's going on in another location in the town right now with sewer problems on a private line, it might be something for wastewater to be taken, to have their say in.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm not familiar with that other property, Al, but that's an interesting point. And my assumption is that you got approval from the sewer department?
That's correct.
And does that approval address the issues that Al just brought up?
I'm not familiar with the issues that Al has mentioned, so I can't speak to whether it addresses them.
What it is there is a sewer, 5 houses with laterals that go out to a private sewer line that runs down into the town sewer line. The problems with blockage and corrosion and breakage is occurring in the private sewer line. The neighbors are complaining, but the town has no authority. It's in an area where there are the old mill houses. The town has no authority to go onto the property and correct the situation. I don't know whether wastewater would even want to get involved in something like that. I'm only raising the issue because of what happened last week at a
Yeah.
council meeting.
Do you know how old that sewer is approximately? Is it relatively
The one
new?
that
Or
I'm talking, although it was put in with the Mill Village houses.
So it's a century and a half ago, Mike.
I think we might be talking a little apples to oranges then in this
No,
case.
I know we are. I'm only,
Yeah, it's an
the only
interesting
reason I'm
challenge,
raising
but
the
it's
issue
interesting, yeah,
is because they have no right to go onto that property.
right.
I don't know whether they just ask in a case of emergency for the right to go on. As I said, I'm sticking my nose where it doesn't belong.
Okay.
There are two things, technical aspects and then procedural aspects. Technically, the pipes that we're putting in nowadays are PVC. They're gasketed so that they are watertight, airtight. They do get tested prior to being accepted, as well as the manholes. It would not be, I think, ludicrous or unusual as a condition of approval for an agreement between the town and the development, which will be, I assume, a condominium owners association, to have an access agreement in case of emergency, so that if something did happen and if the COA was incapable of dealing with it, the town would have the right to enter the property and deal with whatever that situation might be. I'm speaking a little bit, perhaps out of turn. I would defer to Sandy and to the developer, but I can speak from prior experience myself that those types of agreements between public and private infrastructure are fairly common.
Yeah.
If I could just jump in, they are common, and we have no issue allowing the sewer authority to come in on an emergency basis. So whatever is worked out is not a problem for the association to enter into such an agreement.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
may I ask a question?
you go right ahead.
I think during some of the presentation, the engineer had mentioned that, and I guess it's a grassy area. Mike, is that what it is that you'd be driving on? Is that going to be those like the blocks that the grass grows through?
No, we're not proposing that.
What are you proposing?
It could be a stabilized turf. So rather than I know what you're talking about, the turf pavers,
Yeah.
which do work well, and I've seen them before. They actually have other products that sit under the, it's a geo grid that sits just under the surface.
I'm asking for a specific reason. Do you have the distance between that drive and the abutting properties? There's a stipulation in the zoning decision that could be problematic here with that access road.
Well, it's pretty pretty close. I think it's either 5 or 8 feet.
Okay. There's a stipulation in the old zoning decision that dates back to '07. Number F, it says the entire property shall be buffered with a natural growth presently growing
Okay.
with an additional 10-foot buffer or offset along unit C4. This is not near C4, but my concern is, again, the perimeter of the property is not supposed to be disturbed. So if there's any kind of a distance, or if there is not a distance, my strong suggestion would be to try to create some distance so that you can provide a buffer to meet the intent of the zoning stipulation.
All right, well, we can look into,
If
I
you're
know
saying
the
you're
12th.
8 feet off, that should be, that may be sufficient to accommodate that. I was not under realization that was an access road. I thought it was just an area.
Yeah, and it's not, so Mike, is it actually an access road, or is it something that could be accessed in an emergency situation, as opposed to something that's?
It's more the latter. I think that when you see it, it would look like a portion of the lawn.
Was turf area, yeah.
Yeah.
It's turf, so you're not going to see those grid pavers because, as I said, it's a geogrid. It basically sits under the surface a little bit,
Yeah.
and it just disperses the weight of the vehicle so that you don't punch down through the grass. But it will look like lawn area. It'll look like a fairly consistently graded lawn,
Yeah.
so that a vehicle could traverse it. But it's not going to be a driveway per se. It's not. It's not going to look necessarily like a driveway.
Okay.
I mean, just if you take a look at the plan, just eyeballing it, there is the building setback, and it looks like in most cases, maybe all cases, that sewer line is not within 10 feet of the lot line.
Yeah, it's not, Sandy. You're right.
I think you're right. It looks to me like it's not within 10 feet of the lot line. Okay. Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Zavalia before we thank him?
This is Joe. I just had a comment with respect to the sewer line discussion, because it's something now near and dear to my heart, because I actually went through a pretty big emergency situation in my own personal property where the gas company hit a lateral in my sewer. So engaging the sewer, the sewer, town sewer, they weren't able to go onto my property, and I was on my own. So, just wanted to provide that as firsthand experience where, if there, in case of emergency, I had, from my experience, I had to get my own drain layer. That wasn't authorized. The town was not authorized to go on my property because it was on my property. Over.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. And that's another example of what you were talking about, that, the private sewer tying into the town system. So we want to make sure the condominium, Sandy Resnick, we want to make sure that the condo association has.
It's more common than not that
Okay.
you would have language like that
Yep.
in a condo association to give it the right. So that's not an issue.
Okay, great. Josh?
Do you? Should I stop sharing my screen and turn it back over to the?
I'm okay. Anyone else on the board want to continue to see what's the shared screen?
Well, I do have a
I'm
quick
good.
question.
Okay, Josh, go ahead.
No, this is Joe Gardosic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Go
yeah, I
ahead.
can't. Can you guys hear me? Can't speak. I don't know what's
I
going
can hear
on.
you. It's coming through
Yes.
on your phone, mine, I think, Josh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so you
Josh,
can hear
you're
me?
back
Oh,
in.
Go ahead, Joe.
Go,
You
Cardoza,
say yours,
go.
and I'm gonna-
Okay. Mike, do you have a feel for how much ledge may have to be removed at the sand filter and the detention area? It seems like there's a lot of ledge on this property.
There is an appreciable amount of ledge underlying the site, and there will be a good amount of it that's going to need to be removed, particularly in the sand filter area. We flatten out a little bit through here, and we won't have as much there, but there will be some rock removal in this area. We don't really know at this point what the nature of that is, if it's hard ledge, if it's rotten rock, but we do know that there is test holes have located ledge.
You have a feel for quantity? You think it's 500 yards, 800 yards, 1,000 cubic yards?
I can get that for you. I don't have it off the top of my head, and I don't want to give you a number that
Okay.
is incorrect, but that is certainly a number that I can derive for you. Yep. We've got profiles and sections through the entire site, so I can come up with an approximation for you.
So Mike, does it, my assumption then is that the units will not have basements, but will be slab on grade?
That is correct. We're not looking to go down any further than we need to.
Okay, okay. All right, Josh, were you trying to get in?
Yeah, I'm looking at sheet 17 of 17. I'm looking at your Ready Rock installations, and that's my biggest concern is the manholes and obstructions near the Ready Rock walls. I mean, it's standard, but I see more failures of walls than I see of anything else. And with ledge being on there and the retention of water, is that to be construed as that Ready Rock wall being built around near the retention, further away?
Well, I will go back to the plan sheet and show you where we've got that. The first thing I would say or point out is that the Ready Rock is a suggested system. It's not necessarily the one that the developer will end up doing. We present it because it is pre-engineered, and they do have different details for all various different conditions and configurations that you might come up with on the site. So,
how acidic? Have we done soil samples? How acidic is the soil around there? See, my concern is most Ready Rock walls that fail and stuff like that, and you're saying you might not use that, is that there's deterioration of the parts that hold it together, and then we get a good boatload of rain or something. There's a failure of that wall. You know, and I don't know if this is the point, Al, where I can be talking about this, but it's a concern. And looking at some of the material makeup on some of the details, it doesn't make me feel warm and fuzzy that some of that galvanized, if scratched or put, can definitely, you know, corrode away. And when those rods corrode away and you get some heavy rains or something, you can have a failure of not only that manhole system, but a failure of the wall. And so I don't know. It's just, I've seen it happen all too often. And I don't know if this is the form that we can talk about at the planning board of this, but, and now you're saying that you might not use this system, you might use another engineered system. But I guess it was just a question because I don't think some of those rods and materials used is going to last long. Depending on how acidic the soil is.
Go ahead, Mike.
That's not generally something that we do advanced testing on the acidity of the soil. It's not to say it can't be done, but it's not something that we have done already on the site. So I can't tell you if it is particularly acidic or not. I can say that I'm on the grading plan now. I'm going to zoom in a little bit.
Okay.
So the grading plan, wherever you see the term MCU, that stands for Modular Concrete Unit Retaining Wall. And Ready Rock is one of those types of systems. So it basically is blocks that you will put in. And if you look at the plan, you can see where we've got to propose where we need to. I've got them only where I need them, where if I tried to do a grade out with just natural material without a more vertical surface or face, I would go beyond the limits that I wanted to establish. So I've got one along here, along the driveway, and you can see here, looking at the elevations, TOW is top of wall, BOW is bottom of wall. You can see that generally speaking, we're not talking about tall walls, really. They're fairly modest through that area. So I would say that, number one, they don't have, as a general rule, they don't have any of those reinforcement materials exposed. Something would have to happen in order to break the rock. Something significant would have to happen, break the rock and expose that.
Okay.
We have another one over here. Again, we're looking at modest sized, generally, we've got, let's see, one along here. We've got one along here.
Okay.
So we're talking about 4 to 5 foot high walls. We're not talking about the massive ones that you might see at, there's that one that fell over.
Like you see the one at, at Bald Hill Road.
You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and that was a system that was engineered, and that those rods had corroded over the years, and there was a bunch of stuff, and that was a paved, service area. So that's just one example, but I've seen them. But 5 foot walls, I mean, all I was looking for is the safety of the abutting properties, and if there's something of failure, I don't see where it would do much. We could have quick repair. That's all I have.
Yeah, and you're going to have people here all the time. It's going to be a COA.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be a wall that's sitting out somewhere that people aren't going to see it on a regular basis and be aware if there's an issue that's developing.
Yeah.
So I would say that the relative risk for any of these fairly modest walls would be low.
Okay.
For the kind of failure that you're contemplating.
Okay.
Very good. Okay, I think, Mike, you can stop sharing your screen,
All right.
and we can get back to, so Sandy, we were going through the
We have
list.
some more things, and Mike might have to jump in, because I have some general comments
Yeah.
in regards to some of these, and some of these we'll just brush over real quickly. In the list, it talks about the developer shall install and be responsible for the maintenance of the proposed shadow box fencing.
Yeah.
So a couple of things. Number one, that requirement of maintenance will be in the condo declaration. So
Yeah,
that
so
will be,
the condo association will have to,
the condo association will have to do this, and
Yeah.
there are plans now for approximately 750 to 800 linear feet
Yep.
of the shadow box fencing already on the property.
okay.
The next one, I've had some discussions in regards to the width of the drive. I'm sorry. Can I go on?
Yes, please.
There was a question of the width of the driveway, and I asked the engineer today, I don't know if Mark had a chance to talk to him, but if they could discuss this as to whether or not the actual width of the road, the way it exists now, meets the requirements of the zoning ordinance or not. I'd like them to have that conversation so that we're sure that if we do have to go to zoning to get a dimensional variance, that obviously we're prepared to do that. I'm not sure we do. And I'd like them to have that discussion. If Mark doesn't mind meeting with them to see if we can clarify what the actual width on the plan is and if that's satisfactory. I can say that the fire marshal has approved the driveway, the width of the driveway, the turnaround in addition to the hydrant. So
Right.
it might be helpful in making that decision.
Yeah. So Sandy, you're willing to stipulate that the engineer and the town planner will discuss this and come to some conclusion.
Yeah, and we'll
I don't know if the rest of the board is okay with that. It's my understanding that the minimum width for a driveway, assuming the road into a condominium, thinking of it as a private driveway, is 24 feet. And that what's shown on the plan is 22 feet wide. So there's that 2 foot difference. And from my perspective, I don't speak for the whole board, but from my perspective, we don't want to approve something that is inconsistent with what the zoning ordinance of the town requires. So that's the question. And then the question really is there a resolution to it? Can you do 24 feet? Is that not possible? Is that, and if you have to do the 22, how do we get zoning to grant the variance? I mean, there's a lot of questions in my mind about that. I don't think it's a big issue, but we just need to make sure that we don't approve something that's inconsistent with the ordinances of the town.
Mr. Chairman, this is Mike again.
Yes, Mike.
The total pavement width for the common driveway is 24 feet, and that consists of two 11-foot lanes and two 1-foot berms on each side.
Okay.
So we're providing 24 feet of pavement, and you can certainly drive on the berms, although it wouldn't be typical to do so.
Okay.
So I wonder if we're in a bit of a gray area where we are providing 24 feet of pavement.
Yeah.
But again,
Well,
we're
last-
designating 22 as lane width and 2 feet, one to each side is berm.
All right. I think that's probably okay. But again, I'm just speaking for myself, not for the whole board, but we can discuss that further as we go on. Mark, you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm just, Mike, what page is the detail for the roadway?
Yeah.
Hold on for just a second. Go to sheet 14, construction details, and I see an issue already. I've got a section that is inconsistent within and of itself. I've got two 10-foot lanes and a gutter-to-gutter width of 22, which is correct, because we do then have the berm on either side, but the lanes themselves are incorrect. Those should be 11 foot.
That may be helpful. And what's the height of the berm? It says 3 inch, but I'm not sure if that, is that right?
Yeah, that's 3 inches standard for berm. And if you look at the Rydot bituminous berm 751, you get a 3-inch finished reveal. That's that detail right next to the section.
Yep. Okay.
So you'd have 24 feet. Outside of the berm, to the outside of the berm.
Mike's right. It says 10, 10, 1, 1. So that would be.
So we got to change that plan. We'll need that.
Yeah. So that if we come to that conclusion, that obviously that detail on the plan needs to be corrected.
Okay. Yep. All right. Thank you. All right, let's go.
If I can go on. The next thing was talking about the adequate additional parking area. Not only do we meet the minimum, but we actually, the way that about 65% driveways were designed in width and in length, there is room for additional parking right on that property. And one of the units actually, which is the existing home, has a lot of, they can put I think about 6 additional parking. So again, we're using a lot of this property to make this plan better, but I do believe we can produce a number of additional parking spaces, and we'll have that for final showing how they fit on these driveways by width and length.
Okay, so if the final plan would show additional parking?
That's correct.
Okay.
The next was.
Well, I want to clarify, Sandy, I think it's important to clarify something, that the final plan is not going to show additional paved areas that will be for parking.
No. That's why I said, well, I'll make myself clear. From the design concept, because of the length and the width of some of the individual driveways, there's room for more cars. One car will be in the garage and another car will be behind it and one on the side of it. So we'll do the best we can. No, there's no additional paved area.
And so I assume there's a garage inside the unit. So one car will park inside the unit, and then there's parking on the driveway into the unit.
Correct.
For a second car. But there's no parking over and above that for visitor parking.
Well, there are some, 12 of the 16 driveways are double wide, so you could fit 2 vehicles in the driveway in addition to the one in the garage. And then there are a couple that are slightly longer where in theory you could fit, though it wouldn't be practical, but you could fit 2 cars end to end in the driveway as well. So we're certainly meeting the 2 spots per unit, and going above it if we apply the additional width driveways that are, I think it's for 9 of the units.
All right. So that, and would it be possible because I know you don't want to increase the impervious materials, but would it be possible for those 9 driveways to be narrowed for 1 car, and then we could put in 9 paved visitor parking spaces somewhere else?
Not practically. There's no one area where, or there are no areas where, even if we were to try to break that up into a spot with 4 spaces and 5, or 3 spots with 3 spaces, there's really nowhere available on the site where we could put a block of parking and achieve that by simply reducing driveways for the individual units.
Okay, I don't, anyone else on the board have a concern about this, or want to?
I had a question, Joe, with respect to like visitors. Like, what's the plan for that if there's a visitor, if someone has a get together,
Yeah.
where's the expectation of them? Where are they going to park?
Yes, Sandy, any?
Well, I mean, I think it's what we were just talking about. Some of these, I mean, let me just make one thing clear. We meet the requirements of zoning for parking.
Yeah.
So we meet the requirements. What we're saying is there are areas in here where we have double driveways, so visitors can park in double driveways. And Mike mentioned it might be a little impractical, but not as impractical as you think. If you have guests, a couple of these driveways, or a few of these driveways are longer, it can fit 2 cars in there. But as far as having areas of, just like most of us have with their homes, you can fit a couple or 3 cars on there. But if you're going to have a large number of people, there's no place for them to park.
Yeah.
Typical.
Yeah. Those of us who are on a town road have a wider road in front of our house, so we end up with cars parking on the street, which might not be a good option here.
I mean, yeah, this parking on Green Street and this parking on that lot has additional parking. I suppose arrangements can be made if necessary that someone could park on the front, the frontage piece where there's a home on Green Street, which is actually part of the condo. It's just an additional piece, but you know, that would be an extraordinary event. I mean, their neighbors, they can work something out. People manage to do it.
Well, Gina Raimondo says we can only have 6 people over, so.
Yeah,
Problem solved.
where did you get 6?
All right.
I was just waiting for that comment, Joe.
All right, Sandy, continue.
The next thing, it talks about basically aesthetic ornamental fencing along the walls, the retaining walls. And I think that's something that we'll give some papers over to the planning department and work that out before final. It shouldn't be much of an issue.
Yeah.
But exterior lighting,
Yeah.
I mean, knowing what's lighting splashing off here, we're going to have some decorative lighting in the landscaping, and the individual homes will have lights, but there's no lighting other than that, no lighting that's going to flash on or interfere with anybody in the neighborhood at all.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, good.
We get into a bunch of things that have already been approved. I think I'm sorry.
No, it's my understanding items 9, 8, 9, 10 of all, and 11, maybe 12, have all been approved by, right?
Yeah, exactly. So just going past it, that 8, that's been approved, submitted, approved, 9, 10, 11, 12. Obviously, number 12. That's part of our condominium. We understand those services. We agreed to number 13 in regards to the fee. We have condo documents. We haven't shared them yet. I wanted to wait to see some of the information that came in today. As far as something we've been doing on all our condo developments now is we've been recording the storm water manual, operations manual, so that anybody now who buys a condominium gets notice from me more than one time. So we recorded with the agreement before the condo, we reference it in the condo, and to make sure that everybody has notice of exactly what their responsibility is in regards to the soil erosion, the sediment, et cetera. It's very clearly laid out in there. And again, we noticed that. A couple other things just to kind of add to this. Number one, we talked about the fencing on the easterly line. One more issue. Back in around 2007, one of the neighbors who lived at 67 Harris Avenue came to us and explained to us that he has no frontage on Harris Avenue, and actually his access was of one piece of property over another piece of property. So we had two easements to get to his property, and he asked us then if we could help him. And at that time, we agreed, and we asked the board to put that as a stipulation that we would give the owner of 67 an easement, so that if he wanted to, and if he wants that easement, it's obviously still available to go from his property. And if you look, you'll see to connect to that hammerhead.
Do you want me to share the screen again?
It's right at the hammerhead if you want to take a look at it.
Yeah, that'd be good.
I'll wait for that to come up.
This is the overall layout plan.
That's the lot. So at the community meeting, there was an issue raised by the new owner of that property, that he said that he had an easement over that property already. In response to that, we went out and did a full title examination and a title report, which is in your records. I submitted it to Mark with copies of the plan where those actual easements exist. And I can tell you that there has never been a grant of an easement from the owner of our property to 67 Harris Avenue. But we said what we said, and we're willing to do what we said we would do. And if he does want that easement, then we will have an easement prepared and granted and shown on that plan in that area, which is an obvious area where we've given that easement. And again, we double checked. I checked the surveys. I did this myself. We want to make sure that if someone's got any rights on our property, that we respect those rights.
Yeah. And just to be clear, the easement would go.
We would grant him an easement from his property to that hammerhead.
To the hammerhead.
A right to pass and repass.
Okay.
And technically, Sandy, I think he would need an easement through the entirety of the common driveway.
I meant that onto the.
Yeah, but allow him to go through that way around.
I apologize.
Okay.
I should have finished that statement. It would give him the right to pass on the common element, as we refer to as the driveway out to Harris Avenue.
Think he could put a little parking lot on his property over there, Sam?
Excuse me, everyone. This is Justin Wilbur. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Hey, good evening, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, board.
Mr. Wilford, could you state your name and address, please?
Yes, sir. My name is Justin Wilbur, 45 Green Street, West Warwick, Rhode Island, 02893.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, Mr. DeFiore.
Okay.
I saw, with regards to the parking, I just want to emphasize that the dwelling at 45 Green Street, there is definitely somewhere between maybe between 6 and 8 spaces of overflow parking that will be permitted. It will be part of the condo association, and there will be, if necessary, a walking path northwest heading east to getting basically where the water line will be coming in effectively to get there. So, and there's also a nice wide road on Green Street that would be accessible as well.
Great. And so Justin, that would and Sandy, that would end up in the condominium documents and then in the form of a documentation of the granting of that.
Yes.
Because Toby Miller had asked a question, and I think Justin just answered it. But so Toby, if you If you need more, let me know.
There would be easy common access off Green Street and definitely on the existing property.
On the existing property. Okay, that sounds great, Justin. Thank you.
Thank you.
And okay. So Sandy, you got more?
I do not.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
We're certainly open to any questions.
Yeah, so I just want to ask if there's anyone that wants to speak in, it's a public hearing, you know, you've presented your case. Does anyone want to speak in opposition to this development or in opposition to this plan? Actually, the development has to be, you know, the master plan was already approved. So anyone wants to speak in opposition to this?
You have a couple members in the public, Joe.
Okay,
Toby is the first one. You want me to allow them to talk first?
sure. Let Toby talk. Okay,
All right, Toby can unmute himself.
okay, Toby.
Good evening, how are you?
Good,
Just
thanks.
state your name and address, please.
Toby Miller, 44 Woodside Avenue.
Swear to tell the truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right, Toby, go ahead.
My question was in regards to the 10-foot buffer. I see and understand that there's going to be a retaining wall on the north side of the property running eastward down to the new water recovery system. And I'm curious of, my question regards were to the 10-foot buffer area. And I understand there's going to be a passageway or a driveway for maintenance. What was that planned to look like?
This is Mike again. Toby, so that goes back to a question that Mark had raised about what the material for that access path. And I think I'm going to call it an access path because, again, when you say driveway, you get an immediate image in your mind of something that's paved or gravel, but it looks like a driveway. That access path is going to look like an extension of the lawn area, and it will be uniformly graded, so you'll see it sloping down, but it will look like grass and it will be mowed regularly. But it's not going to have the appearance of an area that you're driving on regularly.
So, yeah, I can visualize that, but the question, to be more direct, is there was a natural buffer which Justin has offered to provide shrubing and a privacy screen, I'll call it. Is that still in the plans? And I would like to better understand the potential 5-foot barrier wall where the condos are. I'm central of the lot, so where the last two condominiums before the water retention sits, that's where my home is.
There, okay.
I've got the screen up. So, Toby, are you on lot 337 where the hand is right now?
Yes, that's it.
Okay.
Okay. So we've got a retaining wall here, and I don't have the grading plan. This is the layout plan, but I can go to the grading plan to give you an idea of how high that wall is. And then we are proposing and will provide, Justin would provide the shadow box fencing along here. And as you can see, there is some room. And the fencing location, there's nothing set in stone about that. So it would be possible to locate this closer to the back of that wall and then put in some plantings between the fence and the property line.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is we're showing what the intent is, but the more detailed application of that intent can certainly be worked out between, and Justin, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think you've made it pretty clear that you're user-friendly and willing to talk to people and work with them so that they are ultimately satisfied with things.
I've gone as far as giving some of the or all of the neighbors with the budding property lines a credit at my brother's nursery, which is Willscape, and I'm more than willing to accommodate anybody's desires up to certain species types, as long as it coincides with something that's uniform with the development. And I'd also like to state that if you look at the, Mike, if you could stop moving around, you go to that. Sorry about that. If you
trying to find the grading plan.
If you go back to that area there, you'll notice there's an existing, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the existing boulder wall that is there. And I think if you, being the circles, there's an existing.
No, well, yes, those, yeah, right there. If you look at those slightly gray connected ovals.
Yeah.
So that's an existing boundary that encompasses most, a lot of the property. And you'll notice that we're on the 45 Green Street side of that significantly. And we will respect that and our neighbors.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I've spoken with Justin. We're working fine. So I'm just curious of how it's progressing. So.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Toby. And we have
If I
another,
If I could, only because I was looking into the water discussions. I've openly commented previously at the meetings about the water runoff.
Yep.
And I understand everything that was said today. So just from a point of interest, today my French drain at that residence on 44 Woodside runs every 11 minutes. And I understand we've had an excessive amount of water in the past 2 weeks. What would your expectations be with this new collection system? Would that be drawing from the ledge, or is that basically surface water that you're capturing?
Well, we're capturing surface water, but somebody else had asked the question about the ledge removal, and we know we have ledge in this area that's going to be coming out. Theoretically, the removal of the ledge might create a flow path where it would serve to help. Now, I'm not going to tell you that your French drain system is going to run less frequently, but it is possible that the underground water patterns here might be slightly improved because we're taking out some of that ledge and we're incorporating some of this treatment. But I'm also looking here and I see what appears to be that right there is a bit of a ridge. I don't know, is that a garden or a raised bed of some kind, or?
That's a built-in pool.
Okay. So this is built up a little bit. So as far as the surface runoff is concerned, some of it would be coming down. Actually, it looks like it's all breaking back toward Woodside through here.
That's correct.
Yeah. What I would say is, and it's very tricky, hydrogeology is a totally separate branch of science and engineering, but the fact that we're removing some impervious material underground, depending on what's actually going on underneath, it may have some minute impact, but I wouldn't bank on it. Yeah. I think it's a tough area. You've got a lot of ledge. You've got perched water tables, and that's the reason you have a French drain, and I think that's the reason why you're seeing it run so frequently.
Okay. Because of the ledge, yeah. Okay, Toby, anything else?
Not at the moment, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we have another individual wanted to speak out?
Yeah, Stephen Sheridan would be next.
Okay. All right, Stefan. Okay, Stefan.
Hi, guys.
How do you want to swear?
State your name and address, please.
My name's Stephen Sheridan. I live at 11 Flint Terrace, West Warwick, Rhode Island.
Okay.
Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. Go ahead, Stefan. You're on.
My problem with this is I already have a lot of water, a high water table on this side. I am at 11, which was in just past that area that's not to be untouched.
Okay.
All right. That would be towards the Harris Avenue side of that retention area.
Okay.
As you can see, the cartography there all comes down towards me.
Yep.
I also have an easement through my property, which hasn't been maintained by the town for who knows how long. The footprints of buildings that were put in above and below me over the years have changed the water table dramatically. So now I continuously have water running through my basement. I also have a French drain, which runs every 20 seconds.
Yep. Okay.
Ever since this last rain we had.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, the pipes that are in the back that run through the easement can't handle the water that comes off from Harris Avenue any longer.
Yeah.
So that comes over the berms that was put up there, and now runs like a river over the top as well as through, pulling my topsoil off and depositing it right at the end of the pipe, which I dig out myself every year, which I don't think I'm supposed to be maintaining, but I'm sure that's a separate issue.
That is a separate issue, but I'm going to turn this over to Mike, the engineer. But based on what I heard from his testimony, the outflow going down towards your property will be reduced with the installation of these detention areas. But Mike, can you answer that?
Well, the peak flow rates are definitely going to be reduced. So when we have those storms coming through and water is running down and getting into these structures, the flow rate is how quickly the water is running out, how quickly that volume leaves the site. That's going to go down. There will be an increase in the overall volume, but again, that volume is going to be coming out slowly relative to what is currently leaving the site during those. Now, I think, Stefan, you and I spoke at the neighborhood meeting, and we talked a little bit about what's going on in the neighborhood. Can you see the screen right now and where the little hand is? You're down?
I can.
Okay, so you're one house further down, I think, aren't you?
I'm one more back.
Okay.
So
your backyard is certainly getting outflow from our site. There's no doubt about it. It comes down through this little special aquatic feature. It leaves through the southwest corner through that channel, and it joins runoff that's coming from offsite areas off of Harris Avenue. There's an intermittent stream that runs back here that was identified. It almost looks like there was an underground stream through here, or a stream at one point, that pops out onto the surface before it then dives back down again, which is why you have this somewhat odd shaped intermittent stream, and it stops. It just disappears where it goes back into the ground. So I'm going to agree, Stefan, there is a lot of groundwater moving down the hill through this area, some coming from off of our site, some of it's coming from other portions of this watershed, and it's all seemingly joining up and running down the backs of these properties, including yours, before it then makes its way over to Flynn Terrace. So again, we're talking about a couple of different things. We've got surface water, which we are definitely controlling and managing and improving. And then we've got groundwater that's coming from everywhere on the site. As far as the maintenance issues are concerned and the water running on the site, I don't want to speak for the town, but it does sound like there are some maintenance issues that need or should be addressed, especially if there's an easement involved. The other thing that I know that we started to broach and talk about at the meeting was Justin is a contractor, and Justin, you jump in if I'm speaking out of turn, but if it looks like there is some improvement that could be made off-site, within reason, obviously, but to try to formalize and provide that runoff with a way to go where it wants to go, there may be some discussions that could be had between you and the developer.
Okay, I'm hearing that, but what my point was, with talking with you, with the town's own admission, that the infrastructure cannot handle the water that's coming off now. So that's why you cannot tie into that system. Am I correct? Because that's what we had talked about.
Yep. I'm going to go up to the locus. Hold on. Let me just bear with me.
Yep.
I'm going to go up to the locus map because I think that'll be a little bit more enlightening. Let me zoom in. It gives you a slightly wider view of the area. All right. So, Stefan, this is you opposite the road coming into Flynn?
Keep coming up.
Right there?
One more. That's me.
Okay. All right. So what we've talked about, and this is
it.
Yep.
Okay, where the easement goes through.
Yep. So this is our site. We've got runoff coming down here from the site now to this corner. We've got runoff coming in this direction. It's all aiming and running in back here, and then eventually it comes down and it looks like it makes its way across these properties into Flynn Terrace. We did evaluate. We went out and looked at the catch basins in Flynn Terrace. There's one here at that corner, as I recall. There's another one down at the end of the other end of the barbell. There's one catch basin up in here in front of that house. The piping that is connecting those structures and then running down appeared to be 8-inch. And that's not unusual, but it's probably about the same vintage as that old mill sewer line that we were talking about earlier. And it is certainly not capable of handling all of the runoff. We would not be able to simply take a drain pipe, and run it down off of our property through an easement and tie into that without creating a problem on Flynn Terrace, which is why we've got the amount of oversized infrastructure on our site to manage that stormwater and, again, reduce the amount of surface runoff flow rate that's coming off the site.
Yeah, well, exactly. This is not the opposite of my problem. It's not runoff. It's groundwater.
It's groundwater. That's correct. And it's groundwater that's coming from the entire hill.
And even at all, any more increase than I already have is not acceptable to me. It's just not. Until you can take the water away, until the infrastructure around here is maintained and upgraded to where I can live somewhat peaceably with my groundwater, I cannot see adding more to it. I can't see how the planning board could even let that go. You cannot sell me out. I mean, I am not against you having that there. Do I want this thing there? Absolutely not. But I understand you have a lot invested in it. And I do understand that, progress is progress. But you don't step on a little guy to get there. And I'm the little guy going to get stepped on.
Well,
I've already had enough of that. I mean, I just don't want it.
Stefan, I sympathize with your problem, and I do think it's beyond the planning board's capability. We have to decide, our decision has to be based on what comes off of this property and how it might change it during development. And I'm very confident that the stormwater runoff will be slowed significantly when the new system is put in. The effect that might help your groundwater problem, I don't know. That's not our issue. Okay. And
so that's nothing that the planning board would take into consideration.
Right. We can't take the groundwater in the surrounding area into consideration. We take the stormwater coming off the property. That's the subject. Okay. And we have this discussion like we've had today about, and I'm very confident that what Justin has proposed and what Mike Zavalia, his engineer, how he's laid it out, that it will in fact decrease the amount of stormwater, minimize over time the quantity of stormwater that comes off the property. So the stormwater will run more slowly, but it will run longer. Okay, but it'll run significantly more slowly than it does now, based on the numbers that Mr. Zavalia just gave us. So. So that and you may have issues about this culvert that's not getting cleaned out. I mean, those are things that I suggest you might discuss with others in the town, Department of Public Works, perhaps.
I've had the managers over twice. Some years ago when we first talked about this in the first town meeting, when we started to do this, maybe about, I don't know, it was 7 years ago or so, maybe 5 years ago. And again, just recently, and he had come out and looked at it, said there was going to be a crew here to clean it out for me in 2 weeks. Got a phone call from somebody up at the town hall. All of a sudden, I'm on the shit list again. He never came back. He never came back.
Never came back after that. Okay. All right. So, well, thank you. Do we have?
So the planning board has nothing. It doesn't. The planning board doesn't consider surrounding areas on how it affects my home.
Stefan, we have to make sure that we're not adding to your problem, okay? But we can't go solving everybody's problem that's outside of this property. So I'm comfortable that what the developer is talking about here is not going to add to your problem. It's going to actually, it could minimize it a little bit, but it won't make it worse.
It's going to retain water and increase the groundwater level.
I suspect not, but
because it's coming to me. Instead of running off, I'm getting more.
Okay, heard your point. Thank you. Thank you for contributing your contribution, Stefan, and we'll consider. We have further discussion after the public has been heard. Is there anyone else waiting to speak?
We have one more, Joe. Lynn and Rob from 77 Harris Avenue.
Okay. All right. Lynn and Rob.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes,
we
could
can
you
hear
raise your, could you state your names and address, please?
Yep, my name is Lynn St. Germain Lund, and I live at 77 Harris Avenue, West Warwick.
And Rob?
Rob. Is Rob with you, Lynn?
Yep, he just said it was his name. Did you hear Rob too?
Okay. Do you both swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Lynn, go ahead.
Okay.
What do you-
First of all, I'm a little disappointed that the planning board years ago approved this because I don't think it fits in the neighborhood. This is an older neighborhood. To add brand new condos, I think is doing a disservice to the style of the neighborhood. I also think that not allowing these condo owners to have visitors or to have parking, even though that there is going to be limited parking at 45 Green Street, I think that's also doing a disservice to the people who are going to be buying these condos. So either one, they're not going to buy them. Two, they're going to have their people park on the street that's not wide enough to get emergency vehicles in, or they're going to then park on Green Street and Harris Avenue, which is then going to interfere with the rest of the neighborhood. So I'm a little concerned about that too. And then my third thing is Justin still on?
Yes, I am.
Okay, hi, Justin.
Hello.
One, I had sent you an email after our visit, after our town meeting in July, and I had asked you in the email to get me, you were going to get me where the builder had built some of these condos before. And I never got a response. So I'm a little disappointed with that too.
I don't recall seeing it. There's a good chance I just might have missed it. And I do apologize for that.
Yep. The other thing too is you've said that you have given a credit to all of the neighbors who are abutting the property. I've not heard anything of the credit at your brother's nursery.
At the, I believe you were at the community meeting. I made a verbal commitment to any neighbor that would like a natural buffer or specific that they would have a credit along the property line. It was an open verbal of which I intend to honor completely.
Okay.
So any linear foot of property that we share, if there's something specific that you like that we're not already doing, and or if you'd like to do something specific that we are doing, I'm more than willing to accommodate that. And very little exclusion, if any. It would just, and the only exclusion I would have is if it's something completely out of the normal that wouldn't coincide with our design, I would just ask to work with us and we'll work with you and come to some sort of agreement. But I want to emphasize that, oh, sorry.
Okay, no, that's all right. I had thought that you had already given people the credit towards that.
No, absolutely not. It was a open verbal statement, and it is, and I would like to leave it as such, and I will honor it on the shared property lines. I intend to be a good neighbor, and I hope I've done so thus far.
Okay, Lynn, do you have?
Yes, as far as zoning from our property line, is it 10 feet?
Yeah, let's take a look at the plan, and Mike, maybe you could help point out where her property is and what property line Lynn's talking.
Sure.
Yep.
So which is your house?
2 after the entrance going west.
Lot 435, I believe.
Going up the hill? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Hold on a second.
Okay. I see.
Okay, so is this your property?
That is.
Okay.
So if you see all the way in the back corner, ours is the closest of any other property.
I'm going to go down to the layout plan that shows where the buildings are, and it shows some dimensions.
Okay.
So let's take a look at that. I'm going to zoom in.
Yeah, it's probably the 10-foot setback.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like you're right on my line, or darn near it.
Yeah.
Unit 1 would be the closest to mine.
Yep. So this is Unit 1 in Building A, and it is right at that corner point. That's a 10-foot zoning setback. So that corner of the building is going to be right at the setback line.
Okay, and that is that is what zoning requires.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So Lynn, you all set?
Nope, my husband was just asking, I guess you didn't hear him. How tall are the buildings going to be?
Good question. Good question. Mike or Sandy, how tall are the buildings going to be? Are they two floor, two story, or single
I think
floor?
that's a Justin question.
They're all ranches, 1 story.
All single story, okay.
The plan would be to have higher ceilings on the inside where appropriate, so it might be 8 or 9 foot ceilings, but it is 1 story.
One story buildings, okay. Good. Very good. Okay. Lynn, anything else?
Nope, I think I'm all set. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else?
I would also like to add while I'm on the record, if you look at building E and building D, those may have walkouts in that area because of the nature of the way that works. So those could have a walkout in the back, but that is it.
They're actually, they do contemplate that. If you look at these contour lines coming down, we do have a slope down on each side of the building and then in between that would allow us to have a walkout level behind.
Good. Okay, good. Good. Okay. All right. So no one else, right? Waiting to be heard. Okay. Appears like no one. I would.
No, Joe, you're good. Everybody's had their questions answered.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're
All right. So I'll entertain a motion that we close the public hearing.
I'll move that motion. Josh Barrett.
Justin, is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Joe Garcia. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So the public hearing's been closed. Now let's talk about, discuss approval or not, or whatever. Mike?
Joe, I had another question pop up that was typed in as you were taking that motion, if you want to hear it. Gentleman Chuck Cloutier typed in and said, will blasting or jackhammering be discussed in this meeting?
I wasn't planning on discussing it, but Justin's still with us, so maybe he can talk about it.
Hello, I actually have I'm going to defer to, I have an expert here that is able to speak on that if needed, if there's anything specific. But there was going to be no general comments made unless there was a question.
Yeah. So it was in the chat box, it was a question.
Yeah. The question that was in the chat box is just as simple as it says, will blasting or jackhammering be discussed?
And so from my perspective, it's been discussed as much as it needs to be. We can't know. Planning board can't know how much blasting or how much ledge removal is going to have to take place. That will come up as they excavate on the site. That's my opinion. I don't know if others want to discuss, go further into discussing the blasting. They may be able to, if it's failed, they may be able to just dig it out. And we can't, my feeling is we can't know at this stage whether that.
Well, usually there's, Mr. Chairman, usually set parameters, isn't there, on that? I mean, typically, before the blasting, they take pictures.
Oh, there's all of those requirements. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so there's state requirements, and I think there might be some towns, so it covers all that blasting.
Yeah. There are definitely state requirements that require blasting, and
who knows if they're going to blast? They might just
they might
chisel away at it.
Right, and I believe that it would require a special permit. So I'm assuming at this point the building inspector would be the one mostly responsible. Mark, is that correct?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Blasting permits are issued by the state fire marshal.
So all right, so the state
fire marshal, yeah.
State fire marshals would have to so hopefully that answers the question.
Well,
we don't need to discuss it
just
today.
One more thing. In the past, the board has, in certain circumstances where there's been extreme concern, stipulated that a property not allow blasting. There are alternative methods to blasting, unless and until there was a public hearing. I think you guys did that for the 175 Greenbush property where there
Okay.
was blasting.
All right.
At a follow-up. So I just leave that for the board's understanding. I would say there is a significant amount of ledge that's going to have to be altered, not just for the buildings and the drainage, but also all of the utilities that are going to be in the roadway accessing all of the units.
Yeah.
That will have to be trenched.
Your
so that will-
suggestion is that if they go in and start digging and they realize they might have to do some blasting, that they come back to us? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, I'm suggesting that there be no I'm suggesting that the board might consider, and I actually wrote that down as stipulation 16.
Okay.
I mean, obviously they're gonna have to do something to accommodate the development. And there are other ways to go through the ledge.
I agree with that. There are other ways in that.
So I would suggest, the board might want to consider the stipulation that there be no blasting unless it's less and until required, and at that point, they'd have to come back to the board for authorization. I think in our discussions with the engineer and with Mr. Wilbur early on, it's probably a couple of years ago now, we actually broached that subject at the TRC. And I think he had indicated at that time he was going to use a pneumatic hammer or some other method other than blasting. It's a tight site and there are houses in very close proximity. So I would think that any developer would probably want to look at alternatives to blasting first.
If I may speak, this is Justin Wilbur. I can speak from experience that going the route of, say, mechanical removal via hammering, and again, I have experience in this, will create significant noise pollution and time delays on the project, which are, I think, going to be a real negative impact to the neighbors if we have to go that route. Whereas if we go through the blasting route, if at all needed, and when needed, we would do so through a very tight process through the state fire marshal and very capable blasting engineers, where they conduct pre-blast surveys, fully insured. And the benefit here, there is very minimal noise pollution. And when I mean noise pollution, I personally hear hammering going on around Lippet, and I've been hearing it for years from my house. So I am sensitive to noise pollution, and I would advocate to reduce that by being friendly towards blasting in a very professional manner.
Yeah.
There's no doubt, Mr. Chairman, that there's going to be blasting required if that's the avenue that the developer is going to go in, or there will be some other pneumatic or other method of having to cut through the ledge. The ledge, I believe, is at like 2 or 3 feet on this property.
I can speak to that in some location. Now, I can speak. I personally own an excavator with the jackhammer, and I've spent, unfortunately, many hours on that jackhammer very intimately. And speaking from experience, I think reducing the need to do that is important, which is why we are running slab on grades, and we are minimizing that.
Yeah, and I personally, I'm comfortable with knowing that they have to get a permit from the state fire marshal for blasting. We just leave it at that. They got to get the permit.
Yeah, so that's not, that wouldn't be a stipulation that's required, Mr. Chairman. That's a requirement of state law.
And I have Jeff from Rock Blasters available right now. He was the blasting contractor at 175 Greenbush Ave and accommodated everyone. Okay. If needed, he can speak right now, no problem.
You might want to do that just because there was a concern raised.
To ease the mind of the people questioning right now who's liable.
Yeah.
And I think they did a very good job at 175 Greenbush.
Okay.
My personal opinion.
Justin, maybe you could ask him to join us.
Sure, just give him one moment, and he'll give him 1 second, please.
Seeing a lot of questions coming for this, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
People asking if they're working from home, when's it going to happen?
Okay. Another chat, another question.
Vinny and Deglia raised his hand. He's an attorney of mine, and he has the rock blaster with him. If you would allow him to speak, please, that would be the rock blaster.
All right.
Ivan Aldi Fiore, are you going to question your witness?
Well, I'll let him
I'll let him speak directly if you want to swear him in.
Yeah, please state your name, address, and profession.
My name is Jeffrey Gilman, President and owner of Western Mass Blasting Corporation in Hope Valley, Rhode Island.
Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Vin, you want to qualify him as an expert?
Here, Jeff, can you tell us briefly what your current profession is and for how long you've been doing it?
I've been a licensed blaster in the state of Rhode Island for over 30 years, and I have testified before the West Warwick County.
When you testified before, did they accept you as an expert?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
All right, is there a motion to accept Western Mass Blasting as an expert?
Make motion to accept.
Second,
I second it.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Jeff, you've had an opportunity to hear the discussion that has been held regarding the blasting, and you've also had an opportunity to see the site plans and review what's on the site, the tightness of the site, and have an understanding of where that ledge is located on the site. Is that correct?
Yes, I do.
And can you tell them, can you tell the members of the public that are listening, as well as the members of the planning board, what your opinion is as to what, first of all, what the process would be in order to even be able to do blasting at the site?
I do secure my blasting permits from the State Fire Marshal's office. I'm required by statute to notify anybody within 500 feet. Although pre-blast surveys are not mandatory in Rhode Island, I do pre-blast surveys on all abutting properties before I do blasting, at least offer them to the homeowners. Most people do take advantage of it. So we document any pre-existing conditions before we even start the blasting.
And what's the purpose of doing that?
So if something arises, if there's an allegation of some damage after the project is done, we have some digital photographs to refer to.
Okay. And in this particular site, you would agree it's a tight site, correct?
It's tight. I'm not aware of the extent of all of the ledge, but where we do find ledge, we certainly will do pre-blast surveys of the closer homes to alleviate their concerns about, possible damage. But I approach my business so as not to do any damage. There's a lot of technology available in blasting these days that wasn't available decades ago.
And based upon what you've heard about this site, what you've seen from reviewing the plans that have been presented and are part of the record, do you have an opinion as to whether blasting would be appropriate on this site and in the best interest of the project? When I say in the best interest, not only just in the project, but in terms of the health and the welfare of the community and the surrounding area?
It would certainly make the process go a lot faster, and it would be less disruptive than hammering with mechanical means would take months and months, where I could probably get blasting done within a week's time.
As opposed to a mechanical mean, which would mean what? Can you explain that?
A hydraulic hammer on an excavator just beating on it all day long, and it does disturb people more than the blasting does.
And can you explain to the board how it is that in today's technology you can control the blasting, how it's maintained underground, and how you can have different charges in order to minimize the disturbance in a particular area?
It would be very hard to explain to a layman, but there's a lot involved with non-electric initiation systems and double and triple delaying blast hole to reduce my amount of pounds per delay, which increases scale distance and thus reduces vibration to the surrounding properties.
Okay. If any members of the board have any questions, I'd
There's
certainly
a
have.
couple of questions that have been entered in our chat box. So Toby had asked if the blast company could explain the liability and process to ensure the surroundings neighbors of potential damage, and what's the time frame of the potential impact of the blast area. Because of the.
Let me answer the blast area first, if I could, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, until you get to final plan and then a submission for a building permit, and you go through all the other processes, we can't give you an exact time frame that this blast would take place. However, I think he's already testified it would take about a week's time, if not less, to complete the task once you were permitted to do so. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then the question about liability and process to ensure the surrounding neighbors of potential damage. you mentioned doing a survey of the neighbors. But what impact does this have on the liability? And the questioner was specifically concerned about a built-in pool area.
And may I interject real quick? This is Justin Wilbur again.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but I would like to say that I have personal experience digging through rock on Harris Ave, where my property enters Harris Ave, when we were attempting to manage the water line entering. So I dug with a relatively small excavator. It's a Cat 308. It weighs about 20,000 pounds. And to put it in perspective, the excavators that we will have on this site may have a mechanical ripper, which is not a jackhammer. And my point is the excavators that we will have are approximately 60 to 80,000 pounds and significantly stronger. I bring this up because the relatively small excavator I had did dig through the rock on Harris Ave relatively easily, without the need for hammering or blasting. So with all of this question going on, I think it's very good, but I'd like to just state that the early indications, the rock does appear to be relatively soft, at least on the Harris Ave side, in my experience. And I'd also like to state that the need to penetrate the rock, you will notice that is more on the middle of the property where the utilities run, not on the perimeters of the property. So we, along working with Mike, had this in mind and chose to think about that. And where we would need to go through the rock would be on the middle of the property, which is, of course, further away than any neighbor. In fact, it's the furthest possible point away.
Right, good. And one of the other questions from another neighbor was they want to make sure that they will know well ahead of time if blasting is going to occur because there are people working from home. So, I mean, that makes sense. So that's the question. Will there be substantial time allowed for that?
Yes, the statute indicates that I have to notify residences within 500 feet, 24 hours in advance of blasting. But I always go well more than 24 hours because you often get phone calls and concerned residents that want to ask a lot of questions and perhaps ask for a pre-blast survey. So I give several days notice before I blast and accommodate everybody, just as I did on Greenbush Ave. Even if someone is, not close to the blasting, I would certainly accommodate them. It's just goodwill and it eases fears of people. If they meet me personally and we do the survey, they just get more comfortable with the operation.
All right. I think we. This is Toby saying thank you. I think we're good. Okay, I think we've gone through all the questions. The hearing actually is closed, but we kept it going to talk about blasting. Any discussion about? I would entertain a motion that we approve this petition, subject to, and I can't remember all of the things that Sandy agreed to, subject to all the things that Attorney Resnick agreed to tonight in the public hearing. But that we require coming back to the board for final approval, that it not be done administratively. That's where I'm thinking. I don't know what other people are thinking.
I make the motion to approve.
I second that, Josh Barrett.
Okay. Any further discussion? Tony or Joe?
Approve subject to the conditions.
Subject to the conditions.
Conditions
Yeah.
stated, noted in the technical review and the meeting minutes.
And all of that stuff, subject to all those conditions and subject to the stuff that Attorney Resnick agreed to tonight. All right. So Mark, can you remember everything he agreed to?
Well,
fortunately, this is recorded. It's on tape.
Yeah, it's on tape, and I've been taking notes throughout.
Okay.
There's quite a few elements that would need to be addressed. So
addressed before we go to.
I will do is I will put together a draft decision letter, and I think I will circulate that, which I usually don't do, but to both attorneys. And if you would like me to circulate it to you, Mr. Chairman, I will do that.
That would be nice. Thank you.
And then that way, we're not moving forward with a decision letter that someone's going to object to. If they do, then I guess we won't be moving forward with a decision letter because we'll
right.
We'll have to
that, all right. Okay.
I will talk to Mr. Resnick in the next couple of days. you know,
Yeah.
he went over things. I've got some notes.
Yeah.
There are varying issues and items. You know, we've got the road, we've got landscaping, we've got fencing.
There are a lot of issues that were
Yeah,
raised.
a lot of things. So,
And there
so
were
we'll try to flush those out.
Yeah, but I think the commitments made were okay, as long as we can get, Mark, between you and Al and Sandy,
Yeah.
I think we should be able to put together into a decision letter. That,
Can I just ask, may I just ask one question?
yes.
Did you say you wanted to do the final administratively, or do you want us to come back?
We want you to come back. Okay? And this is, we're not picking on you, Sandy, but all of the ones that were approved, you know, way back that we weren't part of, we've asked all of them to come back for final, not to do it administratively. Okay?
Plus, we don't see you much, Sandy, so we want to catch up on how it's going.
That's great, thank you.
Next time, join from your home so we can check that out instead of your office.
Yeah.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, there's been a motion made and seconded to approve it, subject to documentation of all of the stuff that was committed to today. All in favor? Aye.
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 Didn't hear anybody opposed. All right,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
who was sitting as the alternate?
Who was alternate there? Was it Joe or Jessica? Joe. So Jessica was serving as part of the panel. I don't, anyway, well, all six of us voted approved anyway, Al. Doesn't matter, does it? Okay. Whoever it was voted approved. Thank you. Thank you, Sam.
Good evening, thank you very much, stay well.
Thanks, you too.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening.
All right, item 4. Item 4, is that what we're up to?
Yeah, item 4.
Yeah, we got hardly anything left, I hope. This is, this was done administratively, right, for information, the plan?
Yeah, it's a,
Phoenix Avenue. So what was this? I mean, it looks like
So-
Santilli and Antonio Del Corpo signed over some land to.
yeah, so Mr. Chairman, apparently many years ago, either the tax assessor or the town
Yeah.
improperly merged two properties
Okay,
that should not have been merged.
okay,
And the property owner that, with the rightful owners of the property, ended up going to court at some point and trying to regain their property through the improper merger to another adjoining property. So all this is doing is resolving an incorrect merger that was performed by the town.
okay, all right. So, yeah, I mean, you sent the plan and, okay, that's all it is.
Yes. If you were to look at the plan, you'd say, as I did initially, I said, you can't perform the subdivision because you're creating a non-conforming lot. However,
Right,
that rear lot 2 should never have received
approval.
the land that they received because it belonged to somebody else.
Okay. All right, so that the real lot in the back then had no frontage at all.
Correct, and it was using an easement. The easement is indicated on this new plan.
Okay,
You can see that it says there's an easement there.
all right. So it is administrative. This is just.
It is. I think when they recorded the easement, they ended up merging the lot improper. So the town ended up merging the lot improperly when it was intended to be an easement.
Okay, got it. Okay. Thank you. We had no vote needed on that.
No vote.
All right, and we're up to item 5, public comment. Is there anyone left that wants to speak publicly?
I'd like to talk about the blasting. No, I'm only kidding.
Nobody's still waiting. So all right, since we have no public comment, I'd entertain a motion that we adjourn.
I'll move that motion.
All right, is there a second?
Josh Barrett,
I'll second it.
All right, Joe.
Anthony on the second.
All right, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Healthy New Year, everybody.
Same to you.
Happy New Year.
Take
Good
care.
Christmas and Happy New Year.
Yeah, happy holidays for everybody.
Stay
Take
safe.
care, guys. Okay, I'm leaving.